everyone. Can we all take a deep breath and do a long Om together, bringing the energy here in front of the divine couple, Sri Radha Krishna. Om. One more. Om. Again. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. Can everyone say Hare Krishna? Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna. Hare Hare. Hare Rama. Hare Rama. Rama Rama. Hare Hare.
Hare. Thanks, Radhika. Wow, so that was a super delicious, nutritious lunch. So grateful to our chefs here and all the hard-working devotees who live here and serve here. I think we'll announce more at the end, but this is Sacred Vedic Arts, nonprofit spiritual center, and we are here for the Miami community and surrounding areas. So Brian and Anna have just arrived. I think, is Brian in the... Oh, there he is, Jay. And he's no hiding. Actually, it's very funny because he says he's hiding. Wait till you hear him speak. Oh my gosh. You will hear him roar. So just a quick, I don't know if those of you who know, so I announced that Shamrani Didi, she's our founder here. She's in white. She's the artist of all these paintings you see around. One of the very first devotees of the Hare Krishna movement, 1966. I've been her assistant since 2002, and her health has always been up and down. Thank you, Baladev. Whoa, live stream down. So, what month was that? July, I guess? Anyway, a few months ago, I think it was July, she, her health just kind of took a collapse. Usually when she's nonstop. She's 24/7, serving, meditating, just nonstop. And usually when she needs a break, she takes 24 hours, rests, and then gets up and does it all again. But days were going by and she wasn't recuperating. So our dear Madhavi Mata, right here, she said, oh, come to our house at the beach for a week and do nothing. We didn't go on, we had no phones, no computers, just be at the beach. But still, she was still weak, and I was very worried. 2 weeks we spent at the beach, and then I thought, well, when we used to spend a lot of time in India before we opened the center, and I thought, well, in India we would go to a clinic, like a natural path center, and between diet and exercise and different regimes, we'd bounce back. So I was like, but we're not in India, we're in America, there must be something here. So I called a friend who works at a clinic in Alachua near Gainesville, and she said, well, there's a place called Hippocrates in West Palm. We could try that. So I immediately called, and they have about 6 program directors, and they transferred me to one. And I said, I'm an assistant to a guru, the head of the Hare Krishna movement. And the person that answered the phone said, do you have a center in Hollywood? Because we were in Hollywood for 2 years, and I said, yes. And he said, I've been there. Brian and Rodney, they connected me to Rodney when I called you. And he had been to our center. I was like, oh, this is meant to be. I said, can we come for a tour right now? We went for the tour. I just knew this was it. We had no money, but I called up a friend, can you give this down payment deposit? And that was a Wednesday. We went there on Sunday. And I just knew this was the place. We signed up for 3 weeks. After 3 weeks with their diet and energy treatments and massages and colonoscopies, all the things, the amazing things that they do there. At 3 weeks, she was so much better, but not 100%. So we extended for 2 more weeks. And now she's, look at those muscles. So Brian and Anna Marie, they're pioneers in the field, jet setters, no nonsense, just very much, and they're so personable and loving and kind and just wanting that the whole world can, be conscious. And we'll hear from them both. So grateful that you came down today. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much. And so without further ado, we'll hear from them. They going to speak till about 3. Well, you'll take time at the end for questions, right? Okay, cool. They love questions, actually. So, yeah, thank you everybody for coming. Here we
come up for a minute, Bob?
Yeah.
Since you were the inspiration for us to come here, I want everyone to close your eyes. And so we're going to bring her to the next level. Allow her to get to the point where her body is no longer a burden, and that she flies with the angels and the gods, and the holy and the sacred, and the loved and the compassionate, the empathetic and the giving, and most important, the forgiving. Picture her completely well, so that she walks as light, as an example for each and every one of you, the godly power that reigns in every one of our 100 trillion cells, and constantly permits us to be exactly who we want to be, once you get the fear and the distortion out of your heart, your mind, and your soul. God bless.
Thank you. As you can see, part of Hippocrates' healing method is its body, mind, and spirit, or emotions. And part of it, as you can see, is visualization. Very important part. And he's going to explain quantumness or unlimited possibilities of it.
So the most important person in my life since 1978 is Anna. The norms of humanity. And the norms of humanity today are abnormal and accepted as normal. And I had the great fortune to be with Ann Wigmore in 1978, and we were over doing a 3-day conference in the heart of Stockholm. I walked into the room and fell in love with this woman instantaneously. And I used to play in rock bands, and we used to sing those songs. I didn't believe them until 1978. So I want to introduce the woman that without her, I wouldn't be who I am. The Institute wouldn't be there. And by the way, she's an angel who guides me and teaches me to be softer, kinder, and nicer, because I'm a little macho.
You see. You see. Well, you know, we are so fortunate, Brian and I and the team of Hippocrates, to be able to guide people to a healthier life. I mean, every day is a gift for us and a gift for everybody that comes by, and learn a new lifestyle and get the reason for why we need to change. Because a lot of times people say, well, just change your diet. Well, to what? And you know, why do I need to do that? And why do I need to change lifestyle? Do I need to be conscious? How do I get conscious? And it's so many questions that people come with. And you could be 90 years old, 100 years old, and have the same questions because you've never been rocked. And usually we're rocked when we have a problem, when there is a disease coming. That's when we hit and we wake up. And, you know, for us, we work with doctors, we have nurses, but we mainly work with nature. We work with common sense. So it's very down to earth at the Institute. And you say, why didn't I think of this before? You know, this would have made so many things in my life so much easier. So disease is not here to kill us. Disease is here to wake us up. And either we prevent the disease or we do something when it happens. So most people come. Like one lady came 3 weeks ago. She was in so much pain, and she was pain emotionally and physically. And she left yesterday, and she said, this saved my life. I have no more pain, and I see what I need to do. So sometimes, you know, 21 days, it takes 21 days to change habits, change your taste buds, because our food, like you see what it was in the front there, very much sprouts, is medicine. And, you know, and Wigmore really put this on the map, but it's nothing new. It has been for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But we kind of corrupted everything we do when it comes to food and lifestyle. We think that we should work 12, 14 hours a day. We think we should drive an hour to get to work. It's so funny when I'm on the freeway. You have all these people going that way to go away, and then you have all these people coming into town, and you're like, maybe you should stay where you're at. So we're living really a nutty life, and we pay a big price. And the little ones are the ones that needs our attention and needs to be nurtured and need nurture. They need food. And, you know, we're so in a hurry. When our kids was in Montessori school, and of course we always fed them right, but we saw other kids with their parents right before they stepped out of the car to get into school. They finished the Big Mac. And you're like, these poor teachers now are going to take care of this because they're not going to have energy and they're not going to feel well. So kids needs a lot of attention. You know, we just got a puppy. Puppy needs a lot of attention. And so, you know.
We need a lot of attention from them, too.
And we get a lot of attention from them, a lot of attention from our kids. So, you know, bringing kids to this world is a big deal now because we kind of have to go against the stream and what everybody's doing, and kids are going to see that and they're going to say, how come we live different? Until they get older and they realize how good it was to be brought up with parents and grandparents that understood them and understood a lifestyle. So, you know, our whole passion is to guide people and to make you understand if you live it. So when people live it with us for 3 weeks or 4 weeks, or like our cancer program is even 4 weeks. We have other programs. We have, of course, mindfulness program for people that needs that. We have fitness program for people that want to learn more about fitness. So we have many, many programs. We have Alzheimer program because now Alzheimer is a big, our medical director is so passionate about that. He believes we definitely can turn it over. We can change it. We have believed that forever, but to have a medical doctor working with us who does research, who comes from Harvard, where they've done tons. So that is really exciting, and we will have programs for that in future. So when you see what's possible, you realize that everybody can change. And none of us know how long we have here on earth, but we want to make the most out of every day, right? Don't we want to make the most out of every day? We had, Ajahn was a Buddhist monk that was a lawyer from Chicago that became one of the highest monks in Thailand, lived in a cave. And all he owned was his orange fabric.
I love that about the Buddhists.
Yes.
They just don't own anything, so what
No. So his parents, of course, were still in Chicago, so they would send money and a ticket so that he could come and visit sometime. And then, you know, he kind of got arthritis from all the stuff, mainly white rice and whatever people would give him. So a friend of their family said, why don't you bring him to Hippocrates? So he would come to Hippocrates, and he was so clairvoyant because of all his passion and compassion and prayer, of course.
8 hours a day meditating?
Yes, he knew things. He knew when my mother was going to leave her body, and he writes a letter, which is amazing. He writes a letter. Somebody put a stamp on it. Somebody went to the post office. It's pure magic.
In Thailand.
And he wrote, it arrived on Friday, and he said on Tuesday, because we were so connected with him for so many times, he said on Tuesday she will leave her body, but she is expected. She is welcomed, and I want you to pray for her. Tuesday morning, because I'm from Sweden, my dad calls from Sweden and said, Mom passed. I said, but she was expected. This is when she exactly was supposed. So with his clairvoyance, it was like amazing. He would have us roll on the floor, laughing our heads off because he saw life so funny, so comic. And, you know, he was amazing. And when he ate, because people would fight to fill his plate. I mean, every day somebody else wanted to fill his plate.
They may not understand that the Buddhists can't take
Right.
what they ask for.
Yes, you cannot.
They receive what they're gifted.
Yes, so of course they would fill it with the best of the best. And then he would go outside. And nobody sat in our dining hall. Everybody went outside. And people healed just being with him. So being with conscious people is very, very important. Being with people that drain you and are nasty and not on your wavelength, it's just not good. You want people to uplift you.
Be it family.
Be it family, be it family, you know. So it's important because for your health, you need to be uplifted and uplift other people. So that's where kindness comes in. So I hope you enjoy. Brian has an amazing PowerPoint for you. Thank you.
Hari Hari Krishna, Hari Hari, Hari Krishna. You know, I learned that. 1969, my little 75-year-old mentor from Hallandale, she talked like this, she was New Yorker.
Hello, I'm from Hallandale. I used to be from Brooklyn.
I was at school at the University of Miami. And at that point, I thought I'd be a marine biologist. And she saw me struggling to walk upstairs at 19. My body was obese. I was a pioneer in obesity. They didn't even know to call me fat at that point. You know, what is that? I never saw a guy like that. And being a New Yorker, where I'm from originally, she actually hit me in the back of the head
And said, what the hell's wrong with you? You're going to die.
Now, can you imagine? I used to think I was sexy because I had a cigarette. I thought I'd be the Marlboro Man. I had a cigarette sticking out of like that was like going to attract women. I don't know what kind of women, but certainly not the kind I like now.
And she said, you got to change. I healed cancer.
Now I thought she was making stories up because being an Irish Catholic guy, the only word I heard when I heard the word cancer, somebody was in a casket. Cancer meant death. But I knew she was being very candid and loving and forgiving to me. Unlike my mother, who loved me so much, she wouldn't tell me I was on a path to disease and disorder. She told me that. And I became, in the summer of 1969, a vegan. Now, today, that's sort of hip. You know, when you say vegan, oh, vegan. Back then, it was vegan. What the hell is that? So where did I learn Hare Krishna? Because it was my tribe. No, I never became a Hare Krishna, but it was my tribe. I'd dance and I'd sing. I'd be around people that thought I was normal. I just didn't eat the dairy. And by the way, you were my community. So God bless you and thank you for being my community. That kept me from being there. So today we're going to talk about science. You know, one of the curses of being a scientist, that everything that I think, I have to make sure that it's right. Because in the 55 years I've done this wonderful work, and to call it work is sort of an exaggeration, it's a passion for me. I've been attacked because we've been telling people the opposite of what the story is. We've been telling people you never have to die, you never have to suffer, you never have to have hatred, never have to have prejudice, sexism, racism, war. You never have to have these things.
Oh, it's always been.
Has it? I think at the dawn of time it wasn't. And I think when we were in that 65% of our period on this earth as nomadic people, our tribes basically unified and got along. And abundance was clear. There was no need at that point. As we'd walk and we'd go from the south to the north and the north to the south, the universe, God, gave us everything we needed. There was no fear. How am I going to pay a mortgage? What's my credit card bill? What is my educational fees going to be? You follow? None of that existed. 65% of the time then we became agrarian. And that's where we put fences up
And we said, oh, this is us. We own this joint.
and then we gathered a whole lot of people together and we created countries and they would say, wow, we got to protect the country. And we created armies at that point. And we said, well, we don't like what you say, so you got to do what we say. And I think that's where all of this nonsense happened. You're going to learn today that we're at the dawn of going back to the normality again. And we are really at a moment in history where fear is reigning, and there's very good reason for fear reigning. But at the same exact moment, it's the most liberating period in human history from the dawn of humanity. So let's go now and take a voyage and get into my head for a little while here. human being is not solely biochemical. We are immersed in vast interacting fields of energy. Our cells vibrate within an ocean of electromagnetic forces influencing health at the optimum level. What does all of that mean? It means that the way that we look at ourselves today personally and the way the physicians look at you, be it they're holistic or not, is wrong. That way back 120, 130 years ago, there was a physicist in Germany called Max Planck. And Max Planck said, you know, this guy Newton was a genius. How many of you know the Newton story? Well, Newton was just an average guy that was out walking one night on a moon-filled lit night, and he saw an apple actually fall and asked the question that none of us seem to ask. Why didn't it float up? Why didn't it float to the right? Why didn't it float to the left? Why did it go down? So he went to the two institutions on the planet Earth at that point that were supposed to have the answers, Oxford and Cambridge. And not one person could give him the answer. So this lay guy who had no formal education went back and created something called calculus so that he could describe what he created called physics. Isn't that an interesting story? So Max Planck, 120 years ago, actually said, gee, this guy was really smart, but he was really talking about something that we needed to hear, because we didn't know that before, but it was a surface. What's below the surface? Do you follow that? And physicians don't ask that today. I check your blood test. What is that? Blood chemistry. I look at scans, looking at your anatomy. These are all the surface of what it is. But when we go deeper and deeper and deeper, we actually find you're a vibrating frequency. Now let's see how many of you were listening earlier, because we have blank amount of cells. You listened, 100 trillion. So whenever you think you're poor, forget it. Forget the billionaires, you're a trillionaire. And the greatest gift is these 100 trillion of vibrating frequencies that are interconnected with every other human being and every other life form on this planet and in this universe and in the multiple universes. And what does that mean? Well, you had a Catholic priest that always fought with a really smart guy called Einstein. And Einstein said there's one big universe and it came from a big bang and it went out and it stopped. And that's the defined universe. And the Catholic priest, who was also a physicist, says, no, you're wrong. There's multiple universes. Now, as much as they do a lot of silly things, the government, they have something called the space program. It cost a lot of money, but it's taught us a lot of things, by the way. And so back in 2003, we put something up called the Mars probe. When the Mars probe went up, they photographed that there's endless multiple universes. Now, what do I mean? Listen closely, people. We're getting you to open up your hearts, mind, and souls today. There's no beginning and there's no end. This concept that there's a start and an end and an A and a Z and a 1 and a zillion, we made it up so we feel secure, like the very first people that were agrarian.
We need a fence. We need to protect the fence.
How about if we don't need a fence and we don't need to protect it? We came from nothingness, we go to nothingness, and we are everything at the same moment. Everything matters and nothing matters at the same exact second. So where are you? You're always free. And when you're free, you can do anything. You can achieve anything. You can see anything. You can be anything. But when there's a defined,
You're a girl. This is what girls do.
you're a boy, this is what boys do. You're a Jew, you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're black, you're white. You get what I'm saying to you? All at once we fit into, oh my God, the burden of matter, as I say. Anna Maria often calls it dragging elephants. So we picture all of you when you come into the Institute, like drag. How many elephants do they have? They have 10. At least get them down to 5. How many of you feel you're dragging elephants here sometimes? Immersion in energetic fields. These currents influence cellular communication and biological rhythm. Now, let me explain it to you in a way that all of you will have an aha moment. If I come in here and start talking, hey, what happened to you? Now you're going to say, I felt it. What is I? Who is I? My frequency just disrupted the harmonious frequency that we created in the 5 minutes before that. And you were feeling your frequency reacting to my abnormal frequency. Now take a breath. How many of you think you may be reacting to the cell phones, to the cell towers, to the neighbor's energy that are hostile, to the war that's going on in Europe? Now, I know a lot of you are spiritual and you know all this shit, but you don't apply it. I don't care what you know. It's what you do that matters. So these frequencies are you, and it's your sole objective, if you're really conscious, not make-believe conscious.
I know the rhetoric and the rituals, so I know everything.
You're again in a box. Consciousness means you are all things at all times and nothing at the same moment. Whoa, that feels good, doesn't it? And it's scary as shit. I mean, I'm the director. Am I really? No, I'm frequency. Holy Christ. If somebody yells at me, I'm going to... Do you follow? Harmonics, frequencies, and cell resonance. Now, you may want to notice, how many of you are well educated here? Don't be shy. Let us know. This is from my newest book that will be out in a week, by the way, my 35th book. There is nothing I ever tell you that hasn't been researched. This one, for instance, was 76 different studies. I referenced the 2 that apply to what I'm going to articulate to you now. So this is science, people. It's not science that chemists like and Newtonian physics like. Doctors don't like it. What are you talking? How are we going to make money if we don't sell chemistry to people? What do you mean, put them in a room with a frequency? What are you, nuts? You hear what I'm telling you? Harmonics and frequency patterns affect cellular metabolism and intercellular communication. Now, is that some new age rhetoric? This is science. So when we apply particular frequency, and we're going to do that today, by the way, are the most important frequencies here. I'm going to show you how to use them, and you can download them. They're part of this presentation. So I want you to take this home and apply all of this. This is the now and future of medicine and healthcare we're talking about. Now, how do I say this with such authority? When Anna Marie and I were gifted the directorship of Hippocrates in 1980 in Boston, we created the very first energy medicine department in the world. And sadly, we're the only advanced progressive healthcare system that has it. In our energy medicine department, we have $2.5 million of cutting-edge units that, by the way, change people's lives without you buying anything out of the pharmacy. Who you've got to buy is yourself. And you've got to raise the energetic frequencies that you were born with. And it was diminished because mom said, you're a girl, you're a boy, you're poor, you're rich, you live in Miami, you live in New York. You follow? Before you know it, they chip away. I always picture us coming to the world as the most beautiful piece of marble you've ever seen. And even if you had, as I had, loving, supportive, wonderful, out-of-their-mind parents, they were like Michelangelo who didn't know what the hell he was doing. Mom had a hammer and chisel. Dad had a hammer and chisel. And they took the marble and they cutting. Can't do this. You can't do this. You got to do this. You got to do this. And before you know it, the marble didn't look quite as good as it did. How many of you think you were chipped away? You may not know it, but you've been chipped away. Some of you, by the way, had a sledgehammer hit you. So you didn't have nice parents. You had alcoholics, you had drug addicts, you had haters, you had molesters. And you can sit around all the time and say, oh, well, back in 1965, I was molested, or you can get over it. Do you follow what I'm saying to you? Now, we acknowledge that you have pain, but if that's your life, if you're representing who you are as pain, you're not alive. Who you are. So when people say to me, I have cancer, I'm the lady with cancer. Wrong answer. Coherent energetic input improves cellular synchronization and function. So when we apply particular frequencies, of course in the United States we have to call these all relaxation machines because you have such a free country. Yeah. And so by the way, we have relax here, relax on that one, relax over there, stand on your head over there. Everyone's relaxing all of them. If the government comes in and says, all we do is relax and eat healthy food here. Nothing wrong, they write them up. So here's the first frequency. This is a gamma frequency between 30 and 100 hertz. And what we used to think, even when I began all of this stuff in the 1960s, we used to think the most powerful frequency, this is it, people, most powerful frequency gives you the most benefit. It's completely converse now. We realize the most subtle the frequency, the more powerful it is, because the subtle frequency unify with the multiple universe frequencies that govern all life and existence that we know and don't know and will know in the future. So what does this gamma do? How about if I have problems with processing? We call that a disease, so we can give you a dope called cocaine. Oh, excuse me, Ritalin. So, guy selling cocaine on the street here, he gets arrested. But if you get a prescription of cocaine, it's perfectly fine. So rather than, I would have had ADD as a child too, because I asked too many questions. When they would tell me one thing, I'd always say, well, gee, why is that way? They would have doped me up, given me cocaine. So if you have a processing problem, don't label yourself as ADD, label yourself as a very inquisitive human being. You follow me? That's what ADD is. You're not thinking linear. I wish I had a little ADD sometime, because I think this way sometimes. How about if I could think, you think I could learn more if I could control that? How about your cognitive process? So if you're dealing with your brain isn't working as well as it should, you may be losing your memory. We're not suggesting this works. We're telling you this is cutting edge science. If you take this, which you're going to download later for free, and put it on your phone, and put that phone under an EMF protection in your room at night, at least 4 or 5 feet away from you, this will enhance processing, clarity, and cognitive process. Not because we think so. We've been doing this since 1980 with people. See this big glob over there? You have that stuck in your head. Etheric and biological bodies. Beyond the physical body lies an etheric or biofield layer, an energetic blueprint influencing physiology. Now, doctors down at the University of Miami, which became a pretty good school. When I was here, we used to go there for basket weaving. Now they have real doctors, they moved here and they're doing good. They actually diagnose you this way, but don't acknowledge it. What is an MRI? What is an ultrasound? What is a CAT scan? Are we checking your cells? We're checking your biofrequency fields. And when, by the way, you fall to the ground in this room, do I go over and get some supplements for you? How much is that going to bring you back? You better hope I don't give you supplements. You better hope I go out and get 2 large electrical probes and shock your biofrequency body back to life. Now you think, it sounds really smart till you realize, my God, the Asians and even Hippocrates himself understood that we had something called meridian systems. He went to the East. You know, we always say, yes, the father of Western medicine, so you got to be the best. Where did he learn it? In the East. Hey, what are they poking in on? Hey, I'm going to bring it back and poke people in Greece. So they even knew without seeing it, because they had something called intuition. You've ever heard of that, people? Some of you think you have it. Your intuition is, hey, I've got to eat some French fries because they're vegan. Are they? That's not intuition, that's addiction. There's a big difference. Disruption in this biofield can precede physical symptoms. So my very, very close friend, I miss her every day, was the top sought-after professor at UCLA, Dr. Valerie Hunt. And when my mom and dad were young, she was a professor. Where was she born? On Miami Beach, where her family homestead. That means you could come to Miami Beach, and by the way, put a stake in and say, we own this acre. That's where she was born. And she said, do you know what it was like back in the 1920s? Miami, nobody lived here. We could look in the water, and there were these glowing, beautiful colors that we knew they were schools of tropical fish. And my friends were those fish. I would come as a little girl and go down and talk to the fish. And I think they talked to me, she said. So she was the pioneer in biofrequency field, and she was talking about this stuff in the 1960s. Can you imagine how much sugar they thought she was? What do you mean you can put biofrequency fields and you see the person's going to get a heart attack? Heart attack? What does that have to do? Let's put a big old schmitzy schmacka schnickela on there, charge $1,000 and see if the schmucky schmacka schnickela sees a heart attack. Get what I'm saying? You live in a really weird world, people. You take it for granted. Oh, it's always been this way. It's got to be. That's why it's going to be. It's nuts. It's crazy. I don't buy into it anymore. It goes away. Once people release the reality that's not real, reality transforms. Hopefully to normality. That's what we're all hoping for. I'm waiting for normality. How about you? You waiting for normality? He says yes. So what we do know is that when you walk into a machine, we have these wonderful machines when the guests come in, and we're checking your biofrequency fields. Now, of course, in the United States, we can't say nothing from nothing because we'll be out of business or in jail or gone. We'll have to transcend without wanting to just transcend at that point. But we are actually looking very deeply at your energetic fields at that moment. And we're actually seeing where you stand. Now, we do the blood test too, because we need something that seems normal to abnormal people. They say, well, how do you know this is right? Well, the abnormal people, we have to come down to the abnormal level and say, well, look at this. In every single case of every guest that's come to us since 1956, 70 years now. In every single case, hundreds of thousands of guests, here's what we saw. This is their blood test when they came in. This is their blood test when they graduate 3-4 weeks later. And by the way, they say, that's impossible. It's impossible. That's what Frank Sinatra said. Look where he went. This is actually a photograph of the biofrequency field in your body, an actual photograph. And I did something by mistake about 15 years ago. I was over in Europe on a lecture tour, and I met this Hungarian medical doctor, a young guy, he was probably 30. And he said, I've got to share something with you. He said, in my last year of school, and he had a really remarkable story because he couldn't afford to go to school in Hungary. And in Russia, it was free and the education was better. So he went and learned Russian, top of his class, and the week before he graduated medical school, his professor said, would you come to Paris with me? Because I trust that you'll understand what we're going to do. And in the center of Paris, they actually did the photographic energy of the spirit leaving a person's body. It's the first. Now we have numbers of those things. You can look at them even on YouTube. We didn't have YouTube then. We didn't even have a tube. And he said what they intentionally did was a team of doctors in there from France and all over Europe, but more importantly, they had skeptics in there and journalists in there. And he said, I've never been in a place where there was such stunning absence of energy. People were stunned because their reality was completely challenged at that moment. And as Anna Maria correctly said, until your reality is challenged, sometimes you don't transform or change or desire to change. Bullshit desire. You should never desire anything. You should do it or not do it. Desire is a weak perception. So when you have the inclination, the instinctual inclination to move forward, you move forward because the universe is inviting you to do that. And not bringing you to another level, but bringing you back to where you came from, which is everything you need to be. Conventional medicine overlooks cellular frequency and energetic balance. Energy-based therapies address biofield imbalances before overt disease manifests. Now, can we say that in America? No, but we do it all day long. Rest here, rest there, stand on your head and rest. Do your toe. You get what I'm saying? Now, how does that work? See how well trained you were in the paradigm of matter? It's hard for those of you who sit here, many of you who perceive yourself as conscious, to really take a leap into true spirit. And every single person I've seen, tens of thousands of people heal themselves, literally had a spiritual healing. They transformed their energy matter that influenced their biology. It wasn't the opposite. I think for me it was the opposite. I was so brain dead when I started this, smoking 3 packs a day. Stoned every day, by the way. I was a hippie. I used to play in rock bands right here in South Florida. I had hair down to here. Remember mutton chop sideburns? They came from the 1800s. They should have stayed there. My sideburns stuck out this far. The only one that loved me is my mother. She couldn't tolerate me. Cut your hair. What's wrong with you? Look at your hair, she'd say. I'd say, I'm looking at my hair all day long. I've got to comb it. I've got to brush it. She said, you want to look like that? I said, well, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't want to. She never went to the next step. Do you want to be 120 pounds overweight? She should have said that. It took my little Jewish 75-year-old friend who had healed cancer 40 years earlier. So right here in Hollandale, back in those days, banks had a little bit of empathy. They used to give free rooms to organizations. So Lillian said to me, you got to come to my organization. I said, what is it? She said, nutrition workshop. And I walk into the room, it was like, what was that wonderful movie that they went into a paradisical, Judy Garland was in it. What do you call that? Say? Wizard of Oz. It was like I went there. But it was all 70 and 80-year-old people who had these wonderful stories. Yeah, my leg was falling off. It grew back. I had an 82-pound tumor, even though I weigh 80 pounds. I thought, they can't all be nuts. And so I went into the Wizard of Oz, and I said, my God, this is like amazing stuff. Lillian's not the only one. Maybe I could do that. I'm 20 years old. And I didn't realize at that point, when I was born, I was the most conscious I'll ever be in my existence. Now, we have this weird concept that says, well, when they're young, they don't know very much. If babies, infants could talk, they're all enlightened. If you could have a conversation, they just came from the universe. They came from God. What happened? Oh, it's amazing. You can do anything. Everything's happy. There's no disease. There's no sickness. There's no schisms. People love one another. When you fall in love, it's for eternity. Wow. But again, you meet mom and dad who are very bad who? Michelangelos. And they start chipping away. Oh, you can't do this, can't do that. here's where we are, people, the age of consciousness. Now, here I want to spend a little bit of time, because this is where the fear factor can come from. If you listened to me 21 minutes ago, I said this is a really bad and good time to be alive. The bad time is a lot of you are stuck in the old paradigm. If you're an architect, your job's over. Because now I can actually pick up a phone and say, I want a dream house, and here's what it's going to look like, and it will draw a dream house. That's called artificial intelligence. Anna Maria just flew back from Sweden about a month ago. Our son's at the top medical school. He has 4 more months. He'll be a medical doctor now. And she talks her way into these incredible conferences, amazing conferences. So they flew a big schnauze over from Stanford. Stanford's got a big name. So Stanford's about equal to Karolinska where she was. So they couldn't get some schmo from Yale or something. They had to get equal. And he comes in, and his whole job was to calm down the oncologists because they all know they're losing their job. They're all going to lose their job because AI happens to be smarter than any human being on the planet. So about 5 years ago, I have a guy in my office, a guest, and he says to me, I've been teaching AI for 35 years. This shows you how little I know about this. I just learned about AI. He said, oh, no, we're 35 years ago. So I said, now I'm going to go out and I'm going to lecture here to the guest on campus and travel all over the world. What do I say about AI? And he thought for a minute, and he said, well, right now, AI is 1,000 times smarter than Einstein. That was 5.5 years ago. And he said, but within 2 years, that was 3.5 years ago, every month it's going to become 1,000 times smarter. Now, he got that, but we really didn't have proof of that until 2017. How many of you know what happened in 2017? Where the hell have you guys been? It's Miami. If I went Okobushka, I'd say, well, now I know why they don't know. So out at Stanford, they're basically coming up with answers and questions, and they're all upset and saying, who's coming in here early in the morning or at night and giving the answers? And they found out the AI was giving the answers. Up until then, we actually believed what you put in, you get out. You put in, you get out. Don't worry, it's never going to be smarter than us. Well, they're wrong. So AI is smarter than us, and what did I just say? 5.5 years ago, 1,000 times smarter than Einstein. Now, every single month, and it may be more now, this is old information, 12,000 times smarter a year. And it doesn't need you anymore. It doesn't need humans anymore. So now we go back to the dawn of man. What percentage of our time were we nomads where everything was okay? 65. Apples were on the trees, everything's fine, no credit cards, no television, no jobs, everything's fine. We can have that again. Because we no longer have to strive to be the smartest woman, the smartest man, because our world has been the most cunning and corrupt and dishonest are successful. Now let me repeat this and challenge every word I say. You're going to lose. So our paradigm in our sick societies are the most educated. How many of you know what the word cunning means? Deviant. They're devious. They're using their intellect to outsmart you. Oh, he's not so smart. She's not so smart. Let's get him. That's, Where do you think Murdoch come from? I just read something yesterday. This is like shocking to me. How many of you know who Grant was? I know you went to American school, so you probably don't know, but Grant was one of our presidents. He was also the top guy in the entire Civil War that won the war for the North. And do you know Grant had a good friend that convinced him to invest in 1800s in a Ponzi scheme? So the quote, smart, cunning, dishonest, corrupt, were around then. And I'm sure they were around in Rome, and I'm sure they were around just less, because it's become very well broadcast today. You can screw people to become successful. Do you follow me? And some of you are screwing people in your job. And you say, oh, I'm spiritual, are you? Because you're carrying a burden. How many elephants are you dragging? Maybe you have 85, 90, 120. Some of you have 8,000 elephants. You're not going anywhere. What's happening? I don't know. I'm stuck in one place. So you know what the poor guy did? He knew he was sick. He was dying. He wrote his memoirs, and they sold something like 100,000 copies to take care of his family. That was also when men were men. And when they stood on an altar and they basically said, in sickness and health, they meant it. Not, oh, what's the flavor of the day? A little bit of that, a little bit of fun. On his deathbed, he wrote a memoir so his family would be okay, which happened to be true, because somebody robbed him back in those days. The intelligent, right, robbed him. So now the most intelligent guy in the room and gal in the room is a machine called AI. You're going to compete with it? No way. Competing with it would be like me saying, tonight, we're going to wait for the high-speed yellow train that goes 150 miles an hour. We're all going to get in a bus. We're going to go down and stop it with our bare hands. How many of you are in on that? You ain't going to stop this, baby. And because of that, this is a time of liberation or fear. If you want to hold on to the elephant, you follow me? You can hold on to the elephant.
Well, the elephant's always been here. Everyone likes the elephant.
Or you can say, shit, I'm letting go of the elephant. It's holding me back. So Anna, in the meeting, you can pick up the magazine. Is it in this current magazine that we gave them that the article is? Okay, so if you can see all of our magazines we've done for the last 45 years online. Every magazine we've ever done. And in that magazine, the punchline was, the oncologist, he said, you don't have to use AI as oncologist, but those that do will be oncologists. Those that don't will no longer be oncologists. So in the current magazine you have, not the last one, that article is there. That's where we are, people. Now you say, well, AI is bad and people can do horrible things. Sure, people do people always say bad things about money. The amount of insults on money throughout history has been amazing. The money's bad, the money's evil, money's a piece of paper. This country is not even interesting. Everything's green. Different numbers. At least other countries, they have pink money, yellow money. In Lithuania, they have one of the health gurus on their $100 bill. Here, put a health guru on, you would have to be corrupt to do that. The health guru who started the pharmaceutical industry, which, by the way, is the #3 killer today. How many of you know that? Take a breath, people. Follow me. The #3 killer in the United States of America is going to a doctor and taking drugs. But they get away with it because they have a monopoly. I've had the great fortune to work with 300,000 people in my life over the last 55 years. And the more of that you do, the less chances you have to survive and flourish. If they come to us after chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery, 3 times less chance of recovery. Matter of fact, the New England Journal of Medicine reported that 42 years ago. Then they stopped reporting the truth until last year. In October of 2024, we were stunned to find out a doctor from Sloan and a doctor from the University of South Florida in Tampa, very well mainstream received oncological hospital, said we never reverse or cure metastasized cancer. Now, most people, by the way, by the time you get to the doctor, you have metastasized cancer. You don't have stage 1, nothing. Now you're feeling pain, you're feeling discomfort, you have a tumor, you have something going on, you have metastasized cancer. So 2 incredibly honest doctors said, nowhere in the history of modern medicine have we ever reversed metastasized cancer, but they'll treat you for it. And I'll promise you, when you do biopsies, it spreads the cancer. If you think biopsy's bad, a little poke, how about if I cut it? Now, when the cancer program's there, people come from all over the world. Just had a woman from Saudi Arabia there. I tell a story. I say, how about if you learned that part of the Hippocrates program is I'm going to bring you to Europe for a week, and everyone smiles in the room. Wow, that's nice. Now, not that I'm going to do it, and they know I'm not going to do it, but they say, well, that's nice. You know, that's really generous of Hippocrates. We're going to take them to Europe. But halfway across the ocean, I come down the aisle, and I say, by the way, we're going to spend a week in Chernobyl. You get what I'm saying to you? So then it's really hard for them to answer this, because they already know what they've submitted themselves to. So I say, why wouldn't you want to be at Chernobyl? Now, all of you know that. Why wouldn't you want to spend a minute in Chernobyl? Radiation. So many of them have subjected themselves. Most people have to go through the monkey show before they get to light. You follow? So they have to be lied to, cheated, painful. Their tumors are growing. Okay, they've taken all your money. And now, my Aunt Sally came to you in 1971, and I better come there. You follow? I investigated this 25 years ago, 30 years ago. And I found out if we spent a week at Chernobyl, you'd get 10 times less. Follow what I'm saying? 10 times less radiation than if you had a stage 0 cancer. You'd get more. You get a stage 4, they hit you like with a machine gun. And why don't we want radiation? Give me the word. What do you get when you get radiation? Anyone know? Cancer? How many of you know that? How many of you know if you have radiation or you're in radiation, you get cancer? Raise your hand. Boy, in Miami, they don't teach you anything here. So why the fuck do we give you radiation that gives you cancer when you have cancer? The number 3 killer in the United States. Why does a doctor have training, and we know this to be positive, by the way, to intimidate you and scare you into protocol? I've had the former dean of an Ivy League medical school in my office. His wife healed liver cancer with us. He said, our objective is to intimidate the patient to go along with what we say eminently, immediately. Because if we give people who are really sick time to think about their friends and family, they would not go along with it. I wouldn't have gotten that information if his wife hadn't reversed stage 4 liver cancer with us. Intellect, corruption are unfortunately synonymous now. Does it have to be? No. I don't think Einstein was corrupt. I think he was innocent, beautiful, and open. But it's a rare combination. We can now liberate our intellect and rely on our extraordinary instinct. If you could just be like our great ancestors who were instinctual, they felt. Your dog has 100 times more instinct than you. That's a fact, by the way, not an opinion. The dog feels everything, knows, and they have several senses that pick up the instinct. You're walking around banging into walls saying, what's happening? How come the wall's there? It didn't used to be there. AI-driven diagnosis precisely map biofields and molecular states. Non-invasive frequency-based treatments derived from AI insights offer personalized health solutions. So we're going to have this stuff on steroids. What we've been doing now at Hippocrates, which is really advanced today, is going to be really old in a year or two. Because now we're going to put this stuff on AI, which is thousands and thousands and thousands of times not smarter than us. We're not that smart, Einstein. And it's going to say to us, by the way, yeah, these are the frequencies that you actually thought were good. But here's what 1 million studies in 150 different languages over the last 100 years have told us. Do you follow? No human being has a computer. I read prolifically, read science, read research. If I have a drop in the ocean, I'd be surprised at what's going out there. Because I'm one of those typical Americans. I'm learning English still. My wife speaks 7 languages. When you get out of high school in Sweden, you speak 7 languages. That's because we have the best educational system, the best healthcare system, the best of everything. We're number 1. I'm smarter than the generals. You follow? I'm smarter than the doctors. Our leaders now are notoriously, obviously, con men at this point. It used to be they hid it. They don't even hide it anymore. They just come right out of the closet. Listen to my bullshit. And my whole job is to scare the shit out of you, just like the doctor. If I scare the shit out of you, you'll be very adherent. The end of the world's coming. Oh, we better hide. And when you're hiding, you're not very active, not very conscious, are you? Where are you? You're under the bed. It's Doc here. The boogeyman's here. What are you talking about? There's no such thing as a boogeyman. How do we know? Take a breath, people. Laugh at ourselves. Take a lot of joy in the fact we're nuts. We're completely off the rail. We're off the chain, man. We're crazy. And until you have levity, it's just like an alcoholic. Until he or she realizes they have a drinking problem, they think everything's fine. Well, they only drink 8 drinks a day, every day, 7 days a week. I don't have a problem. But you have the same problem. You actually thought you were conscious and smart. When you realize we're totally unconscious and stupid, then it's okay. Now we have a lot of room. A lot of room to move. Studies show ability to reduce inflammation, enhance tissue repair, among many other cellular benefits by frequency. Now, we can't say these dirty words in a free country called America, but we have watched our energy medicine department take large tumors and help them go away. I can legally say help them go away. I can't say, oh, that's a dirty word. It starts with an M and has a K in it. Now, the difference between other people, they have theories, they have philosophies. You know, there's a lot of money in holistic medicine now, so half-wits who weren't very good at the mainstream medicine, they now call themselves holistic. They work with you on those things, but they don't have 70 years of experience with hundreds of thousands of people. They don't have clinical research. That's the difference. Every single day, 7 days a week of our life since we were a little boy and girl. How many years is this for you now? 52? 52 years, 55 years, combined 107 years of work. We've been watching people heal themselves. So we get pissed off when you don't. The doctors get pissed off when you recover. What happened? It's an enigma. Yesterday at 5 o'clock, we had an oncologist doing a consultation with Anna Maria. Thank God she was European, so she was a little bit more soft and open and not as corrupted at that point. And she said, I don't want to do what I, for 30 years, have been telling other people to do. Now, do you know what amount of consciousness and letting go and guilt you have at that point? She had all of the above, but she's sweet and she's lovely, and I believe she can heal because she's soft. So I walked into the room, I felt soft. I didn't feel hardened and prejudicial and judgmental. I didn't feel that. If you are all the above, you have layers of deception. It's hard to get the core of your God. If you soften up, let go, and become palatable, we can get to God right away. And God will always guide you in the right direction. But God's not somewhere else. God is talking to you all day long, and like a schmuck, I don't listen most of the time. Because I let the evil intellect get in. Can't do that. Done that before. It didn't work. You read it can't work. Right? Your mom and dad told you it can't work. The expert. Who's the expert? I don't know. But they told you it can't work. Because we've institutionalized to control. I was telling this story yesterday. They brought me to Brentwood, California. Now, this is where the real footsies, my schnutzes, live. This is like Miami Beach on steroids with money. And I'm in the house of a major Hollywood producer who won awards for 20 different things, like this award and that, and all of them in a big thing. And they said, we were going to bring all the people from UCLA here. I said, wonderful. So they're all in the front row like you guys. Imagine if you're UCLA doctors and the president of UCLA, and they're all sitting right here like where you are. And the first slide I put up is from this wonderful, wonderful economist who, by the way, helped to create the economy of the Western world. And his statement was, once we licensed medicine, it became corrupt and faulty. Because once you institutionalize anything, now you have to have some parameters. I'm not crazy. I mean, you have to do something. But the reality is, then the corruption will seep in. When I was a little boy in the 1940s and 50s, we loved the doctors. The doctors became doctors because they wanted to help. That was their mission. That was their devotion to do that. They've been changed. They've been given a different story. I'm not saying all. Anna and I were watching PBS about 3-4 months ago, and we were so touched. I cried sitting at home watching this. There was a young medical doctor from Northwestern, so obviously a smart guy, about 35, and he had an interviewer from PBS, a black woman whose sister was a doctor, so she had a little more insight to medicine than the average person would. And said, you know, back in 2020, 21,500 medical doctors quit. And we just did a poll in all 50 states and all provinces of Canada, and 25% of medical doctors intend quitting in the next 2 years. You think we have a crisis now? You wait. And if they stick in there and they want out, they're even more dangerous than if they leave. Because what I don't like, I'm not good at, I'm going to tell you. How many of you are really good at what you don't like? Raise your hand. Well, you're wrong. You're lying to yourself. What you love is what you're excellent at. I get my staff together, and I say this about once a year. They think I'm completely nuts. I'm the first boss that said, do what you want to do. Everyone else says, you got to do what I say. Because I know one thing, people who do what they love are excellent at that. So now back on track. So she looked at him, and it was a poignant moment. It was well-filmed, articulate, smart guy. He said, our doctors burned out. And he looked at the camera and said, we're disappointed. We didn't become doctors not to practice medicine. So today, the minimum wage employee tells you what you can do, what you can't do, what you can treat, what medicine you use, what scan you can do, etc., who knows nothing from nothing about medicine. Do you follow? Now imagine going to school 12 years, obviously having an intellectual capacity and a spirit that you really want to help people, and coming out and being told you can't really practice medicine. No wonder, number 3 killer. Beta. Now we're coming down, as you see, 14 to 30 hertz. Now, if you lack alertness, productivity, and energy, so that you slackers, this is the one you need. How should you have this? All day, all night. You can put music in your office, your house, wherever you are, in your car when you drive. I assure you that this is actually going to make you more alert, more productive, and you'll have more energy. The number one thing, if you said, what's the one thing everyone tells you for the last 25, 30 years? I don't have any energy. They don't know what it means, but they don't have any energy. What it means is that this frequency's gone. You are burned out. It's gone in your body. So inversely, we look at it, you're lacking this current. You're lacking this frequency that connects you to the multiple universes, and you're feeding it, and it feeds you. Later, we're going to download these if you're interested. So your cells are electromagnetic. That's how we measure them. As a matter of fact, for 25 years, till the government came in and told Anna she couldn't do it anymore. She trained about 200 doctors. We were about ready to write a book on cell frequency and the emotional diagnosis we could do from cell frequency. Thank God we didn't put that book out. We would have been in jail. So they shut us down. But Anna and I would be in the room at night, sometimes late, and she'd say, look at this. And there were glow factors. So over 90% of your cells had little to no glow factor, had no energy. And about the same amount had rouleau. That's a French word for they stuck together. So if all of you were starving, I'd put a morsel of food in the room, energy in the room. You all jump on that one little morsel of food. That's what you see. So what we were showing for 25 years, and she stopped at least 10 years ago, so things are worse now is what I'm saying to you, is that people dramatically lacked energy, and there was no glow factor. And rarely we would see healthy people who had glow and flow. So your cells are, that's nice. Your cells are supposed to, by the way, be independently flowing, smiling, and glowing. And this is the one that will help that to happen again. If you take dark field analysis and apply this long enough, within about 6 days, you're going to have that happening. Ancient culture is an energy field. Ancient healers recognize magnetic fields, vortexes, and negative energy zones. Modern science confirms geological and electromagnetic conditions influence health. Now let's explain this to you. How many of you know anything about ancient building? So let's give you a few facts that are really interesting. When Neanderthals were where you come from, most of you, unless you're African, our white ancestors in Europe, Neanderthals were running around Europe when the Egyptians were building the pyramids. How many of you know that? Now, they weren't that far apart, by the way. If you were a good swimmer, you could probably swim there. So you see the disparity and the diversity of energetic consciousness at that point. Well, what we know is Rome and Greece and Athens and all over, they would send in people who were sensory. They would come in with something like birch branches. And we laugh at this. When I was in Sweden about 25 years ago, I couldn't not get this because I'm a Scorpio, so I'm very sexual. They had this thing you put out in the backyard that was a birch branch that looked like starts with a P and men have it. And it stuck out. And when it wasn't going to rain, it went like this. And a day before it was going to rain, it went like this. So when you laugh at guys hundreds or thousands of years ago in Greece and in Rome who would go out and feel the energetic currents of the earth before they built a building, it wasn't silly. And notice the buildings were round. And in fact, Anna Maria forced me to build 2 of our buildings round. The building she's in, which is where all the medical stuff happens, and the building where all the therapies and treatments are. Then we have yurts that are round, that you go out into the woods and you're doing yurt stuff. Of course, a wonderful story. We're keynote speakers at a major medical conference in Athens about 10 years ago. And this is one of those conferences, I'm the big schnutz, but I really wanted to listen to everyone else because they were really smart. I kept saying, no, let them talk a little bit more. And one of the guys was terrific. They did it all in English out of courtesy to us. And he was not only an MD practicing really progressive medicine, good medicine, but he was also an expert on Hippocrates. Now, I'd read 68 books on Hippocrates, but I never read this. I never heard this. He said, you know how Hippocrates would train the physicians? Number one, they could only work with patients out in an open field in a round area. I said, that's amazing. He said, yeah. He said, there are sketchings of this. And so they would put you in the middle of a large open area out in the sun, and it would be round. And he said, that's because if you give people corners, they'll hide in the corners. And when I was bad, which was quite often, I went to a parochial school. How many of you went to a parochial school? Can you imagine me? All the kickback I gave them? They were always putting me in the corner, which they didn't even know why they did it, but it represents you can't be you. If you look at a corner, it doesn't give you a vista, doesn't give you the ability to see large and have an imagination. Do you follow me? So it contains. So they put them out in an open field round that you can't hide. And who do you think Hippocrates' favorite guy in the world was? Who was really courageous, by the way. He gave his life up for what we now call democracy, which now is going away. But his name was Socrates. You ever hear that guy? And Socrates said a lot of really smart things, but the thing that resonates the most with this conversation we're having, Socrates said, what? Tell me the most famous thing Socrates ever said. Know thyself. So Hippocrates trained his young physicians to ask one question. Tell us who thou art. And he said they would be there sometimes 3 days. They'd go home and sleep. They'd come back. Some people took up to 3 days to really authentically expose who they are, because most of you don't know who you are. Funny story. When Anna first moved here from Sweden, she couldn't understand why Americans would come up and say, "What do you do?" So I explained, we're a very young culture, and we don't have a depth of history and wisdom. So the Americans evaluate who you are with your job. So I trained her, she had a very thick Swedish accent then, to say she was a garbage collector. It was so fun. It's a true story. So she said, "I'm a garbage collector." And you see the people walking away saying, "Oh, the poor girl, let's get her a job." I said, they went away, didn't they? So doesn't this make complete, utter sense? Until the person can tell you who they are, how can you work with the person? Until you know who you are, how can you heal? Because you're not congruent with yourself, which is God and God's energy that's connected to the multiple endless universes. And there's no beginning and there's no end. It's an endless flow of greatness and godness, and it's always progressing. And it's us that jumps out and uses our intellect, and we're going against that train at 150 miles an hour and trying to stop the damn thing. And it's literally, not virtually, impossible. Modern science confirms these things. So all this wacky stuff they used to do in these ancient cultures, most poignant story is there's still tribes, bush tribes in Australia that send scouts out. Some of you may know this. This is a great representation of interconnective energy. And so the scout, when the tribe wants to move, the scout can go 100 miles away. And when he reaches the area that he feels is appropriate, because he's felt the energy field of the area, his eyes become the camera, and the entire tribe 100 miles away see what he's seeing.
Oh, that's impossible.
That's impossible. What's impossible is what you believe is impossible. What is possible is what you believe is possible. Imagine the poor Wright brothers. No education, they read a lot. They looked at dead bodies of hundreds of people that tried to fly. Everyone said, "You're a schmuck, what are you talking about? You have no education, you're bicycle guys. You're never gonna fly." They said, "Screw you, we're gonna fly." They leave Ohio, they go down to North Carolina, they're flying, they say, "That's impossible." How did most of you get to Miami? Get what I'm saying to you? Everything is possible. It's the limitation of consciousness and the separation between you and your godliness. Because they have always externalized God, because organized philosophy, theology, and religion needs to have the front man to collect the money. If they told you, you don't need the front man, you don't need the temple, the synagogue, the church, you don't even need the guy that went to theological school who, by the way, is completely corrupted because he believes there's one way. And once you believe there's one way, you're going nowhere. We don't even know how many ways there are. But I assure you, if there's multiple endless universes, I'm sure there's multiple universes ways. Internal healing sources. Oh, you've got to go back again. That one. I love that vibrational thing. See, this is nice colors here. This is the Miami colors. Back in the 80s, you know. Miami Vice and all of this stuff. Internal healing resources. The human body has innate regenerative capacities often underutilized. Now you say, that's not true because down at the University of Miami at Jackson, they would know that because they're the smart guys and I'm not that smart. How many of you ever had a big wound? Raise your hand. You ever cut yourself? What happened to it? The weirdest story on that one was, I'm at the gym, and I go to the gym because that's my macho part. I'd be really stressed if I didn't lift intensely heavy weights. And by the way, as you get older, I'm 74 now. So as you, by the way, get older, if you don't have muscles, you're screwed. Your brain doesn't work, your heart doesn't work, but more important to me, libido. You say, oh, that shouldn't be important. That's not spiritual. It's the most spiritual goddamn thing as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, God. It's what drives us. It's what moves us forward. Every thought, every action, every romantic, all of the flirting, all of that stuff would be gone. I want it. So what you have to understand is that we have this unbelievable ability to create our reality and buy our reality and own our reality. Most of you don't want to own your reality. My mother did it to me. The psychiatrist, the doctor did it to me. How about I did it to me? That was a Frank Sinatra song that never made it. I did it to me. You get what I'm saying? Imagine if we had like a conscious Frank Sinatra or Boubet. You know, Boubet's like taking his place now. And he talked only conscious words. Yes, you fall in love when you love yourself. And until you love yourself, you'll never have a good relationship. Well, that's really weird. I could see all the people at the bar saying, what the hell is he saying? You know, let's take another puff. Aligning with internal energy flows can lead to spontaneous healing. So every year, the least we've ever had at Hippocrates is 3 people, the most is 7. We have spontaneous remissions. Every year. Remember, I've been with Hippocrates since 75. I moved it down here in 86 from Boston. When I met this lovely Swedish beauty queen, she was running Europe's most famous center for inflammatory disease. And when I was in Europe, I was opening centers and developing centers all over the countries and learning the European approach, which is, again, not as adolescent. Not as adolescent. And what we understood at that point is that people had complete control of whether or not they were going to get well. I see people come with stage 1 nothing and die. I see with stage 9 everything and they live. And the mechanism is spontaneous. So after I saw this about 10, 15 years, I finally got it. I'm sort of slow. Hey, this really happens. You know, 3, 4, 5, 6 people a year have these 2-pound tumors and they're gone in 2 months. That is scientifically and biologically impossible with the standards of science we accept. You follow? You can't break down with an immune system a 2-pound tumor in 2 months. 2 years, okay. We see that all the time. So I started to talk to them. And the one thing that they all said was a very honest thing. It took me a while, about 3 years to get it. They all said, I finally realized I may die and I have to do something. So they had to face their demise and they weren't ready to go. Now some people face their demise, they're ready to go. It's perfectly fine. If you've done what you need to do, or you're so completely verklempt you don't know what to do, go. Get out of the way. You follow? But the fact is, if you have a purpose, and passionate purpose, and a contribution, and your objective is to fulfill yourself, the only objective you should ever have in your existence is fulfillment. We have all these arrogant ideologies and philosophies about we're here to serve other people. This is Judeo-Christian nonsense and other crap. We are here to serve ourselves because we're made in the image of God, and if you serve God, by the way, you are serving all. Period. End of story. I'd have a religion, people would be bored shitless. I'd say the same thing every sermon. 20 times, 30 times. You didn't get it? We'll say it 100 times. Then they'd go out and say, well, I looked at the internet, and Bashkutska Shnahahaka said, no, you can find your reality in a tree. I said, well, a tree has its own reality, by the way. A tree has to find itself, too. And trees that find themselves are beautiful. You ever see it?
Get out of my way.
Yesterday morning at 7 o'clock, Anna Marie said, this tree is really, making a mess, and guests have to walk in this. So I made a decision. It was the hardest decision I've made in the last 2 years, to cut some of the branches off the tree. To me, to cut a tree is like, mortal sin. It's like rape or something like that. I just want, I said, God, you gave me this tree, and it's beautiful, and it's shedding, and it loves me. Should I really do it? And a message came to me. It's probably my intellect, and I'm probably wrong. You better cut it, because the guest will trip over this stuff. Now I'm going to come back, and the tree's going to be going like this all of the time, too. Don't walk down this thing. I'm going to hit you with a branch. I'm sorry if that offended some of you spiritually enlightened folks. I love these little dots. Now, this is most important when it comes to reversing a disease. It's focused intention as therapy. Book that we wrote 3 years ago is called The Self-Healing Diet, and there we reported many, many meta-studies. How many of you know what a meta-study is? We finally figured out, the scientific community, at least legitimate scientists, the ones who don't feed off the nipples of stupidity, found out that, by the way, how science works is some guy dressed like me that flies in with a Learjet, comes with a $20 million check, and says to the guy at the University of Miami, or Harvard, or Stanford, here's what we want you to prove, and here's $20 million to prove it. You know how the mob works in New York? Same way.
We'll give you a deal you can't refuse.
And how do you think University of Miami and all these organizations function? Because some guy with a Learjet comes in and gives checks all of the time. Now, how many of you were naive enough to think there was real science going on? So statisticians realize this, few of us realize this number, so we only read meta-studies. Now, they can't lie on meta-studies. So if you have 100 studies on a particular subject, and not me, because I couldn't do it, you have a woman or man who's an expert with statistics go in, and they say, wow, that's amazing. Even though there's 100 studies, there's 100 different outcomes. They believe 100 different things happen from doing the same study on the same subject. But look at this. All 100 studies found this to be true, so they extrapolate that to be true. So they've actually got to take studies and find truth out of the studies to make an honest study. This is like a Marx Brothers movie. That's not funny. It costs a lot of money. So these are the studies. So in those studies, what we know is that when you have focused intention, now some of you call that prayer, some of you call it meditation, some of you call it contemplation, and some of you call it the absence of you. I try to get to the absence of me. That's where I'm the smartest, when I'm not involved. Once I'm involved, something's going to happen wrong. What are you talking of? You didn't do that. That didn't work before. Can't do it again. You follow? That within 5 minutes, every one of the committed participants all over the world they looked at, their immune system increased by 40% in 5 minutes. Now, how many of you know how important your immune system is to if you're sick or you're not sick, or if you age or you're not age? So if you're going to age, weaken your immune system. If you're going to get sick of any disease, doesn't matter, you don't have to name the disease, any disease, weaken your immune system. And by the way, if you want to be totally unconscious, weaken your immune system. Because 80% of your immune system comes from healthy bacteria in the gut, of which about 8% of the American population have, mostly immigrants. on plant-based diets. Once you put an animal food into the body, you actually do the same thing you would putting chicken in your house or dairy in your house and not refrigerating it. So what happens if I put chicken, or yes, organic, of course, and all of you are enlightened, the carcass of organic animals in your body, or organic milk, robbed from the bosoms of a cow, and I put it in my kitchen, and I didn't refrigerate it. What would it smell like there in about a 2-day period, 3-day period? How many would want to live in that room now? So the bacteria multiplies to a negative bacteria and destroys the immune system. That's 80% healthy bacteria, 90% of psychology. So you say, why is everyone a little Meshuggah? How many of you are not Jewish here? You know what Meshuggah means? Nuts! I'm not Jewish either. Even though I look like I am. What do you mean? You follow what I'm saying? You are actually destroying your body. We're going to get to this diet thing in just a minute. Without even knowing you're destroying your body. And then you have some expert on the internet or some holistic doctor that's going to charge $18 zillion. Let's test this, let's test that, let's do this, let's do that. And what do you come out with? I don't know. We got more testing we got to do. How about change your head, change your diet, get your fat ass up and move. My great-grandfather would laugh. You mean you make money telling everyone to do what we do? What a con man you are. If we didn't move, if we didn't eat clean food, if we didn't have affirmative attitude, everyone would have croaked 150 years ago. Don't you know that? How many of you have members to the fitness club? Oh, look at that, I go to fitness club. How often do you go? They love you in January. I'm running $1 million. Where's everyone? We don't know. That's negative intention. When you believe something is good for you and you don't follow through, that is actually a bigger burden than not knowing what's good for you. Do you follow me? The Muslims say this beautifully. I love Muslim. When I was a kid, Malcolm X scared the shit out of all of us. Because he was the first one that talked back to white people. I loved it. I was part of the civil rights movement. I refused to go to Vietnam. Number of hair down to here, mutton chop sideburns, smoking grass. And Malcolm X basically said, after he was condemned and told, you're an evil guy and you're going to, and then they shot him. The government came in and killed him because he was telling utter truth. Just like I think the young generation, Tupac, they did the same thing with. They killed him. Jack Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, they killed him. Martin King, who, by the way, I had the privilege to march with. And Coretta King was a surrogate grandmother for our children. She didn't have grandchildren when she was growing up. And these people were not exceptional people, they were people. See what you do? Oh, they're special, they're exceptional. You know why? So you let yourself off the damn hook. You are them. They're fallible, but they're clear. Direct thought and intention can modulate biofrequency affecting cellular environments. Not because we say so, because we know so. Research shows energy healing may reduce tumor growth. We have to say may. I don't want to join 115 of my friends that are no longer with us. How many of you want to be more creative, have more intuition, and be better at meditating? This is it for you. Uh-oh. You gotta wait till that happens. I'm gonna talk about Ben Franklin soon. You never thought that would come up, did you? Put it back to the last one if you will. this is coming down. Remember what I said to you before? 40 years ago, we all thought we hit you hard. It's like hitting you with a hammer. It does more work. Now we realize, no, the more subtle it is. So a way hopefully I can get you to understand what I'm saying. If I want you to do something, I can yell at you, scream at you, make you ill, and be an enemy of you. I'll make you do it. Or I can tickle you till you laugh so much, you're willing to do it. So the more subtle we get, we're being tickled by the universe. And in this case, the tickling is going to create more creativity because you're closer to the imagination of the universe. Do you follow? I call it in my book, Emo Spirit, the invisible library. There's this invisible library. All things that need to be known, have happened, and will happen is there. You just have to put your head into it. You don't have to work for consciousness, by the way. You don't have to sit all day and om and meditate and stand on your head. That may take you away from consciousness. What you have to do is allow consciousness to exist. When you came here, you were completely conscious. Do you follow? Working hard at something is always indicative of it not working. Do you follow? I'm spending 100 hours a day doing this. Well, you don't have time to do what you need to do then. I have friends, they meditate 4 hours a day. This is a really funny story. Germans. And I love them. They're great people. He worked for the World Bank up in Washington, lived in McLean, Virginia. And when they built homes, they actually built giant closets at 4 o'clock in the morning, which is a great time to meditate, by the way. Three is actually better. They'd come out, and he'd go into a closet, and she'd come out, and the kids would actually take care of themselves. At 8 o'clock, they'd have to bring them to school. So I knew them for 25 years, and they came to Hippocrates when we moved it down here to Florida. And they came and said, we have a very serious thing we want to ask you. You've known us for a quarter of a century. We meditate every day for 4 hours, 365 days, and we don't feel any better. We don't feel any more conscious. I said, I never thought you'd ask. If I locked myself in a closet for 4 hours a day, I wouldn't know much either. So it's not the process of meditation that heals you. That's calming the mind. It's releasing what you already know, the invisible library. Do you follow me? You have the invisible library. All things that have happened, all things that are happening, and all things that will happen. Things you can't imagine. What do you think the Wright brothers figured out? They figured out what will happen. They visualized to the point they saw themselves on a plane and they manifested that. It doesn't happen any other way, brothers and sisters. Only one way. You create reality. You are reality. Your reality is everything, and you make it happen. And anything other than that is mystical bullshit. You want to be more creative, intuitive, and your meditation is deeper, and you don't have to be meditating to get deeper meditative states, by the way. You become more intentional when you have this frequency. Or I listen to Mozart. Mozart takes me off the chain, man. But the Beatles do too, and Jimi Hendrix does too. These people were completely off the chain. They were completely immersed in the frequency of their passion. Do you follow me? And what you're lacking is knowing what your passion is and being immersed in it. That's what you're lacking. 95% of who I talk today don't know who they are and why they're here. Or they say, I'm a garbage collector. I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor. I'm a billionaire. What are you? Know thyself. The doctor wasn't even permitted to help you until you could tell him who you were. Doesn't that make utter sense? And you're trying to figure out with a bunch of people who don't even ask you the question, what's wrong? And what's wrong, you're not there. And when you're not there and you're not present, how can you not be sick? Do you follow me? If you're not present inside of yourself, you have these open, gaping holes. So now we get to my buddy Ben, my favorite of all Americans, little chubby guy from Boston, moved to Philadelphia. How many of you know that Ben Franklin was the top scientist of his day? So I'll give you an example. He was working with the King of France. And the very first time they had a medical panel to see if something worked or didn't work. And there was a guy who was actually doing psychic healing in France. And he was on that panel, and they said, we don't know how it works, but we see it, the effect of it working. So he came back, and around the same time, he said, you know, lightning is the scariest thing in the world. Now, today, you don't worry so much about lightning, especially in Florida. If you did, you'd move out of the state. And what happens is everyone else, when lightning came, hid in the house, hid under the bed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what he did is he went out and said, can I control lightning? Now, some of you may have had a good history teacher. So how many of you know what he did? He took a kite. The only way they could get anything into it was like amazing, they got kites, and he put a metal bar at the top of the kite, but more importantly, put a key at the bottom close to his hand. And he had a theory that worked out. He said, when the lightning hits the metal bar at the top, it's going to interconnect that invisible frequency we're now talking about, interconnect with the key, and it did. And the next day, he created something called lightning rods, listen closely, that has saved trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars and millions of people's lives. The scariest thing in the world back then, they thought it was the devil, was lightning. Because roofs were not like this, they were thatch roofs. And when lightning hit the grass, that house burned, the next house burned, the town burned, the city burned, etc. So Ben Franklin explored bioelectric phenomena, anticipating modern biofield science. His work helped integrate energy concepts into medical paradigms. Validating traditional practices. So you say, well, you know, this is not mainstream. Look at the names here we're using. UCLA and Yale. Validated acupuncture, qigong, tai chi as modulators that improve bioelectric fields and health. And believe me, these guys didn't want to find that. They went in to disprove it. But after you see the same consistency when you stick a needle in here and a needle and it's affecting something there, you have to tell the truth. You don't have to tell the truth, but it was so obvious they had to tell the truth. These practices reduce pain, enhance immune function, and enhance subtle energies. Now we get into what you really are. Humans as light beings. How many of you know what a photon is?
It's a particle of light from the sun.
Exactly. So in the middle of the sun, every single second, endless zillions, because we don't have a way to perceive how many, of photons are born. They immediately start bouncing back and forth every second on neutrons. And when you feel the sun and the heat, that's what you're feeling, the friction between that. Now, the sun is not a planet. It's what? A star. So if I had a suit, I couldn't be burned. If I stood on top of the sun, I'd fall through. It's only 2% particles. And it's how life was created on this planet. There'd be no life without that. As a matter of fact, this planet was a big dead planet. The water was completely dead for the first at least half of the planet's life. And then something really weird happened. What we now think vitamin C and nitrogen came together, made love, and created a cyanobacteria that needed oxygen. So it created oxygen. So photons literally get to the end of the sun in 100,000 years. So the one now that's being born, endless zillions, take 100,000 years to get to the surface of the sun. They shoot off so fast, they go from matter to light. They are moving through the multiple universes so rapidly, they disassemble themselves. So they become the string, as we talk, not molecules, not atoms, not protons, neutrons, a string. But what evolved on this planet to be captured are green leafy plants. Now listen closely, people. This is a punchline on diet. This is so simple you may miss it. What evolved to create and capture all life on this planet are raw green leafy plants. There was no other life except green leaf. First one were invisible algae. Then the first land popped up. Anyone know what the first land was? American schools. It's a continent and a country. It starts with an A. Australia. So Australia is 1 million years older than any other land. It popped up, and then the algae with the sand created beaches, went back and forth for millions and millions of years, and became grasses. So this morning when I got up and Anna Maria got up, we took 5 algae. Today we'll drink grass, and we'll drink green juice, about a quart of it, made out of sprouts, which are the brothers and sisters of grasses. Disease rates dramatically reduce. Aging dramatically slows. Not because we say so. We have 70 years of clinical research on hundreds of thousands of people. Now we can basically enhance that by now sticking you in a room with a biofrequency field that resonates with a healthy heart. The reduction of tumor masses and cystic problems, etc. Ain't no money in that. Biophoton emission reflects health, coherent cell, light signaling correlate with vitality. Meditation increases biophoton coherence, indicating improved systemic harmony. So once you calm the mind, you get the what? The electrical system to work. So these are the kind of testing we do. I'll just go through this quickly. These are the brain burgeoning frequencies. So we actually see how your brain is. If your brain's not functioning and you're not in a certain state of the brain, your consciousness is not there. So every guest that comes in, we're looking at this, because if you don't have consciousness, we can't get you to function, just like Hippocrates was wise enough to know. If you don't know who you are, you can't get well. So it's the same thing. We actually measure where your energy frequencies are, and then we employ lifestyle and treatment therapies to increase the areas that are sluggish. This is wonderful. It comes up the neuron system from the brain down. Now we in medicine use aura fields, so you know that. A lot of you learn that spiritualistically. Mainstream medicine, we use aura fields to see. Is she too much in her head? Is she too much in her heart? And from that, we can determine more than I can from the blood test. We need the blood test. Everyone likes the blood test. This is subtle energetics and diagnostics. So these are fingertips. Looks at the heart, the kidney, etc. From your fingertips, we actually do very, very sophisticated, much better than scanning, to see how your organ systems are working. When guests come in, this is what we do. Now, of course, we can't say much about it. They're resting here, they're resting there, they're standing on their head. Adjusting these fields can prevent disease progression. Of course, this is a theory or hypotheses, because that's what we do. Positive emotions and HRV. Okay, we got to go back once again.
Excuse me, Brian. It's 10 to 3. Are you going to have time for questions?
Oh yeah, I'll stay here as long as it takes. You don't, I'm not going anywhere. I'm Irish, remember, this takes a long time. Love, gratitude, forgiveness boost heart and variability and reduce stress response. So by the way, if you say to me, what's the most powerful healing mechanism? It's love, gratitude, and forgiveness. How many of you really, truly have ever forgiven somebody or yourself? Have you ever felt better? Never. You feel like, wow, you can breathe. You actually do feel the breath, wow. And most of you,
Oh, you know what they did to me in 1968? Let's talk about it some more. They must have been really effective. I've been talking about it since 1968.
I have a really good friend, Max, little guy about this big guy. When I first moved down from Boston, he went to the gym with me. And I noticed when he would stop and talk, people would surround him and they'd sort of touch him. They wanted to touch this guy. And I'm in the shower and I look across and he has numbers on his arm. And I was shocked because he's a very upbeat, positive guy and not wounded in any way. And the next day, I said to Max, I said, you were in the Holocaust? He said, yeah. So I said, could you please tell me why it didn't affect you? And he didn't miss a beat. He said, if it had, Hitler would have achieved his goal. I said, wow. If somebody wants to wound you, if you accept the wound, you're wounded. I asked Coretta one time, your life and your children's life and your husband's life were being threatened actually 1,000 times a day, not virtually. Did you ever hesitate? She said, no, I forgave. Because I knew that those people didn't feel the joy and the love that I had for all other people. Those of you who were Christians or purport you're Christians now, the greatest words that Christ said to me were, he's on the cross, and they always blame the Jews for everything. It wasn't a Jew, it was a Roman guy. Didn't have Catholics then, but he probably would have become a Catholic. He's stabbing him. How many of you remember the biblical text? What did Christ say to the guy that was killing him? That's right, I forgive you. And I said to Coretta, how did you and Martin know to do that? She said, we follow the words of Christ. Remember, Martin was a minister, but we didn't do it initially. We went to India, and we saw how Mahatma Gandhi did it. And you may not know this, but Mahatma Gandhi used Judeo-Christian theology to bring down the English. Why? Because they were Judeo-Christian. So he wasn't going to give them Hindi stuff they didn't understand. He was going to meet them where they understood it. Brilliance, openness, compassion, forgiveness, love. That's what does it. It always wins. He brought down the English Empire, man. These weren't sissies. 400 years they controlled the planet. Now we get to nutrition. Photonic energy is captured in the plant cell. You saw the picture. How many of you were observant at the beginning? You saw something called a what? Remember that green plant? You had a microscopic close-up of it? That's called a chloroplast. So what evolved on this planet to create you and all their life and the oxygen and everything else on green plants were chloroplast. They were the first solar collectors. And they convert carbon into oxygen. Now what do you think you should be eating?
Let's cook it. Let's process it. Let's an animal eat it. And let's kill the animal and get it from the animal.
If I gave you a knife and said chase the animal, all of you would be vegan immediately. Because if you did catch the thing, it'd bite you. Well, that's not what Holy Schmahaki Schnooky said. Well, maybe Holy Schmahaki Schnooky isn't keeping up with consciousness. The evolution of consciousness is persistent, consistent, and always progressive. What we know today doesn't matter tomorrow. What I know this morning doesn't matter tonight. Now, it sounds philosophical until I get into quantum physics. It's what quantum physics is. There's only movement forward. There's no beginning, there's no end. It's perpetuation of life. We are comfortable within beginning and ends, but there's no such thing. You just have to learn to jump into the river and let go, and everything's going to be fine. But if you think you can control the river, you're screwed. You follow me? How many of you know how to control a river? Give me a river. So the universal foundation of life, raw, organic, enzyme-rich, support mitochondrial function, which is another weird story. Mitochondria is not part of the human evolutionary process. It was some kind of a parasite that adapted itself to the human body and took over your cells. Isn't that amazing? And we're very clear now as science guys, that we wouldn't have survived as a species if mitochondria didn't hijack the human race. It's the energy source in the brain of it. So there's another life form that you actually are.
That's not what I learned at school.
It's a shame what you learned at school. It's great to go to school. It creates an elastic brain. But you can take an elastic rubber band and do a lot of negative things with it. Or, by the way, you can hold together your asparagus. That's what I like to do. Now, a lot of you need this in Miami. I mean, I used to drive down here like in an hour. Today I was hoping we'd get here by 1 o'clock. 18 zillion cars on the road. This is calm focus and mindfulness. Now, mindfulness is not meditation, prayer, and contemplation. It's a state we need to be in all of the time. Like my dog is 100 times better at than me. Do you follow me? Mindfulness is, why am I here? What can I contribute? What will fulfill me? You only have 3 questions in your life ever. If you can keep asking yourself these questions and fulfill them, you're fine. Why am I here? What can I give? What can I contribute? And is this fulfilling to me? If every one of those are not checked, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time doing the wrong thing. Now, am I sure of this? Positive. If you're always mindful of what's happening and you're giving something, the universe is embracing you and supporting you. It's like when I find the plug for the electric. I could walk around. This is the fanciest piece of equipment I ever bought. I paid $2,000 for this equipment. Where's the plug? There is no plug. And most of you are fancy equipment walking around with no plug. All you have to do is submit yourself to be nothing and allow the universe to make you everything. All you have to do is let go of who you are and who you perceive you are and what you think you need to be and the universe will allow you to be exactly who you are. Isn't that wonderful? This is why AI is great, because it's the smartest guy in the room. So you can now be you and not try to be something you're not, because you'll never be as smart as that. Do you follow? And smart doesn't make you good. Forgiveness makes you good. Do you follow that? And the first one you've got to forgive is, why owe you? And I had a lot of forgiving to do at the beginning. Men of my generation, we just had to curse, spit, and smoke. You choose. I picked Clint Eastwood, but you could be John Wayne or Clint Eastwood. That's all a man had to do. Pretend you're tough all the time. Emotional frequencies and aging. Chronic stress and anger accelerate cellular aging. Positive emotion states or coherent biofields slow aging and support longevity. Not because we think so, because we know so. Everything you're learning today, I wish I had this room filled with medical doctors. They may, as the doctors, the top doctors in Europe for oncology, Anna sat with a month ago, will be resistant. But as the doctor from Stanford said, you don't have to use AI, but if you want to continue to be a doctor, you have to use AI. Do you follow me? What I'll say to you as a human being is you have to be conscious to continue to live. You have to be conscious to be able to forgive. You have to be conscious to be empathetic. You have to be conscious to be loving. You have to be conscious to be truthful. And you have to be conscious to be well. If you're not well, the universe will take you away because you're part of the problem. And you should thank God if you're suffering so much to be taken away. Thermotherapies and movement, Scandinavian saunas, infrared treatments, and steam bath detoxify and enhance cellular vitality. They increase the biofrequency field. So this morning, as every morning, 365 days a year, no matter where we are in the world, I was in the sauna doing 1,000 sit-ups for 20 minutes. You say, well, that sounds impressive. Why aren't you doing it? It's not impressive. Your ancestors got this. You know. Oh, they did rituals. No, every goddamn day they went in there to detoxify and become conscious. That's what they did. Because they realized the less toxins you had in your body, the more freed you were to be aware. Do you follow? The less toxins you have in the body, the more free you are to heal a disease. The less toxins you have in the body, the more free you are to be positive, affirmative, and supportive. Because toxicity is not a biological factor. It is an emotional and spiritual factor. Most, quote, spirituality is toxic spirituality. It imposes upon you. When I was a little boy, they told me I was a sinner at 6 years old. I didn't know what a sinner was, but I knew I was a sinner. They made sure I knew I was a sinner. How about you? You got the same shtick? Yeah. So now, how many of you were brought up Catholic here? Let's see all the suffering people. We were taught to be suffering. You got to suffer. You don't suffer. Look at Christ on the cross. He's bleeding. Get your ass up on the cross. The best bleeder is the most devout. So they said, you have to go to confessional. I'm like 12. I said, what's that? Well, you get into the room in the box, and the guy doesn't see you, but you got to tell him your sins. I didn't have any sins, but I listened to the 14-year-old boys. And they were always talking about girls and putting sperm in them. Now, I didn't really know what sperm was, but I had to have a sin. This was a wrong thing to say. So I get in the confessional, I say to the priest, I put sperm in a girl. He said, what? For the rest of the school year, they wouldn't let me go home at lunch, and they wouldn't let me go home with the rest of the guys. I had to wait 10 minutes. They thought I was going to rape somebody. Because I was a sinner. If you think that's spirituality, I'm glad I'm not. Walking, climbing, and integrated exercise, we created with the Scandinavian something called neurosize. When we tested this, we only tested it on dementia and Parkinson. And within 14 days, they all improved 42 to 48%. This takes you to a whole new dimension, neurologically, energetically, and consciously. So it's very subtle movements. And the movements are, can you actually balance yourself and be coherent at all times?